Hello. We're going to read Merry Moosey Christmas. It's written by Lynn Polder and illustrated by Russ Cox. Everyone deserves a holiday break. Please, Santa, please, begged Rudolph. Just this once. Can I please have Christmas Eve off? Santa looked skeptical. Rudolph persisted. I've never had a chance to stay home on Christmas Eve and listen for the jingling sleigh bells on the roof and the whoosh down the chimney with presents for just me. Santa's heart was as soft as his belly. Oh, 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 he laughed. Okay, Rudy, just this once. But first, we must find a worthy replacement to lead my sleigh on the most special night of the year. And you must help me train him. And so Santa and Rudolph set off in search for the perfect substitute. What about him? Asked Santa. Wrong size, said Rudolph. How about that one? Pointed out Santa. Too feathery, said Rudolph. Antlers? Asked Santa. Horns, said Rudolph. So look, they were looking at the elephant, and then the ostrich, and then the bull. Discouraged, Santa and Rudolph flew northward. Sorry, Rudy, said Santa. It looks like you won't get Christmas Eve off after all. Whoa, wait, what's that? Exclaimed Rudolph. They landed the sleigh at the edge of the forest. Rudolph and Santa measured and poked and prodded. That should do. That would do. Oh, could do. With a little training, they agreed. The moose seemed willing. What should we teach him first? Asked Santa. Nose glowing, answered Rudolph. Rudolph stood in front of the moose, and he made his nose glow. Flashity, flash, flash. Now you try it, said Rudolph. Just think bright thoughts. The moose thought of a hot, sunny day with car headlights. He grunted and he groaned and he held his breath and he stood on his head until his face turned red. But his nose did not glow. Well, maybe this'll work. Santa offered a clown nose out of his sack. Rudolph shook his head. Sorry, Santa. It looks funny, but it doesn't really shine. The moose held up a hoof as to say, wait a minute, and he raced down the road. He was back in a flash, wearing a headlamp. That's not a nose, said Santa. Shines plenty of light, said Rudolph, to help you find your way. It'll do, Santa said, and Rudolph agreed. What's next? Asked Santa. Flying, answered Rudolph. Rudolph took a few flying leaps over the moose's head. Leapity leap leap. Now you try it, said Rudolph. Just think, soaring thoughts. And the moose thought of gliding eagles and float planes taking off from the lake. And the moose stood with his back on his back tippy toes and flapped his front legs while Rudolph gave him a boost. But he did not lift off the ground, not one itty-bitty bit. Maybe this'll work. Out of his sack, Santa pulled a beanie cap with a propeller on it. Rudolph shook his head. Sorry, Santa, but that looks silly. And it would make a much bigger propeller to lift that big fella. The moose held up his hoof as if to say, wait a minute, and he raced down the road again. What do you think he might bring back? I don't know. This time he whizzed back with a jetpack. Santa and Rudolph looked at each other and they agreed. It'll do. What's next? Asked Santa. Directions, answered Rudolph. Rudolph gave a lecture on the North Star, the latitude and the longitude, traveling through time zones. Yakety yak yak. And now you try it, said Rudolph. Just think. Guiding thoughts. The moose thought of hunters' compasses and signs telling the out-of-staters where to go. The moose pointed north with his snout, south with his antlers, east with his front legs, west with his back legs. Maybe this'll help. Santa pulled a globe out of his sack. Sorry, Santa, said Rudolph. He'll need more detail to find streets and addresses. The moose held up one hoof as if to say, wait a minute, and he raced down the road. He found his way back with a GPS strapped to his antlers. Santa and Rudolph nodded. It'll do. So he's got a GPS just like mommies and daddies have in their cars. That tells them where to go. What's next? Asked Santa. Rudolph thought out loud. Well, let's see. Nose glowing, flying, directions. Seems like there's one more thing, but I can't remember what it is. Couldn't be too important then, said Santa. Well, if I think of it, I will let you know, Rudolph told the moose. In the meantime, practice, 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 and arrive at the North Pole at dusk on Christmas Eve, ready to go. Thanks, Moosey, added Santa, giving the moose a pat. Santa and Rudolph headed back to the North Pole, where they were busy getting ready for Christmas Eve. The moose stayed home, where he was dizzy getting ready for Christmas Eve. There he is practicing. The moose couldn't help himself. He was so anxious. He arrived at the North Pole at dawn on Christmas Eve day. He tried to stay out of the way while Santa and Rudolph and the elves and the other reindeer finished up the final preparations for the big night. Rudolph stayed with the sleigh until the last second, making certain that everything was perfect. Not having second thoughts about staying home this year, are you, Rudy? Asked Santa. Rudolph gulped a great big gulp, leaned over and he whispered, doesn't matter if I were. Look how excited the big guy is to have a turn leading your sleigh. You're right, Santa winked, but still, it won't be the same without you. Rudolph turned for home before more than his nose turned red. So Rudolph is a little bit sad that he's not going on the trip, but the moose is very excited. At last, it's time to go. Giddy up, shouted Santa. The moose soared skyward. Santa ordered to Rudy's house first. Moosey, head your way. He's been waiting a lifetime for a special night. We mustn't keep him waiting. The moose flew to Rudolph, straight and steady. Rudolph had barely been home long enough to set out peanut butter and cookies for Santa. They were his favorite, and blueberry muffins for the moose to make him feel right at home. To his surprise, he heard sleigh bells. Could Santa be arriving already? Rudolph jumped into bed and pretended to be asleep, and he listened for the whoosh down the chimney. But instead, he heard crash, boom, bang. Oh Rudolph jumped out of bed and looked up the chimney. Santa rolled out of the sled and looked down the chimney. They shouted, "Landings! We forgot to teach him how to land." Rudolph hurried onto the rooftop to helped to right the sleigh. But before he could utter a word on how to do landings, the moose held up a hoof as if to say, "Wait a min," and Rudolph interrupted. "I know. Climb in and I'll take you." Rudolph jetted the sleigh back to Moosey's favorite store. "They'll do," Santa and Rudolph agreed. "Hurry, there's no time to waste. Millions of kids are counting on you," Rudolph shouted. Santa snapped the reins and the sleigh lifted off, and with Moosey leading the way. And that Christmas Eve, some pretending to be asleep, children not only heard jingle sleigh bells, and a whoosh down the chimney, but they also heard, "Merry Moosmas Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Merry Moosey Christmas.